Yo guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel, or welcome if you've never been here before. So today I'm just going to be doing the weekly forecast for next week in Forex, breaking down these 5 pairs, which are the pairs that I'm interested in for next week. So this is going to be the forecast for the week commencing the 27th of September until the 1st of October. Alright, so let's just jump into it. So in euro dollar, we were seeing breaks of structure to the low. So we had a break of structure, break of structure, break of structure. And then what we would have expected if the downtrend was just going to continue straight away is some type of reaction from this area here. So we would have expected it to follow through, but it didn't, and instead we got a break of structure. So in that sense, I think that it's definitely possible for the euro dollar to continue higher, because we would have expected it to continue lower out of this area, but it actually broke structure. So this break of structure indicates to me that potentially the euro dollar could go higher. So in terms of where it could go higher from, like I forecasted last week, we've got this order block here on the low, on the daily, and we have had a bit of a reaction to that. But what I can see is that there's still this refined point on the 4 hour, which has imbalance above it, like I mentioned last week. So I'd probably expect really, if we are going to move higher at this point, but we'll probably see price come down into this refined point of the daily order block before moving higher. So on the daily for EU, what I'm seeing is the potential for essentially the price to come out of this low of the daily range and then move higher towards the highs of the daily range, and potentially to look at breaking structures higher up. Now, what I'm also aware of is that this area here, it did have imbalance, and what we've also got is a wick here which grabs liquidity above this wick, and the same could be said for this wick here which grabs liquidity above there. So in that sense, price has actually reacted off the impulsive OB for sales on the daily. So price could basically just continue lower and just completely ignore this intent move, and the purpose of this move could have just been to facilitate mitigation of institutional orders in this order block up here. So I'm not against, I definitely could see the euro dollar going lower, but also I wouldn't rule out the fact that it could go higher. So in terms of where it could go higher from, I think this refined point down here makes sense to look for buys from. And then on the 4 hour, so keeping in mind what I've said, on the 4 hour, if we break down structure, what we can see is that since it was up here on the high after breaking structure to the daily, we started to see these breaks of structure to the low on the 4 hour. And what we've actually got is mitigation coming through these breaks of structure on the low. And price has kept mitigating until this break of structure here, where it's not actually gone back up to mitigate this area, and then it's broken structure again, and it didn't come back up to this area, and then it broke structure again. So looking in the shorter term, we've got these two most recent breaks of structure on the 4 hour. So in the shortest term time frame, what I'm seeing is this most recent break of structure was caused by this wick here on this 4 hour candle. So what we could see is basically just price is broken down, it returns up to this wick, which is where the institutional order block is, which broke structure, and then it will just continue lower. So in terms of continuing that move, what I can see here is on the 1 hour, we've got this minor break of structure. And in terms of where that minor break of structure actually originated from, what we've got is this supply zone here, which has got a clear imbalance below it. So potentially going into the start of next week, if we're expecting price to just continue the sell from this 4 hour order block, then I would be looking at probably selling out of this area that calls for minor break structure on the 1 hour. Now, what's also clear to me on the 4H is that we've got this order block up here, which calls this impulsive nature and the impulsive breaker structure, and there's actually a huge imbalance there, which still hasn't been filled. So in terms of looking for sells on EU, I think it'd make sense for price to come back up to this 4-hour order block as well to fill this imbalance and then mitigate any buy orders that the institutions need to mitigate that are sat in this order block here. So in the whole on EU, I'm looking at potentially buys out of the low on the daily, and then I'm looking for sells to either break structure on the daily to the low or just to reach the daily low order block. And I'm looking for those sells coming out of either this 1H minus structure order block, which is a continuation from the 4H order block from last week, or I'm looking at price coming back up to hit this order block up here, which caused this impulsive break structure here. So for me this week on EU, there's basically 3 opportunities. There's a sell opportunity coming out of here. There's a sell opportunity coming out of this area here. And then we're looking at buy opportunities out of the daily order block there. So I'll see what price gives me this week, and if I see any of these opportunities unfolding, I'll look to take an entry with a small stop loss. Alright, so moving on to GU. So on GU, it's kind of a similar story to what we saw on EU with the daily structure. So we were breaking structure to the low. We had a second break structure to the low, confirming that we were in a downtrend. But then we've had this breaker structure up to the high. Now, again, just like on EU, it could be considered that basically there's this impulsive order block, this order block which caused the first breaker structure on the daily, and that this move here could just be a return to that order block, taking liquidity from above these highs here, and then mitigating positions that were taken in this order block. However, at the same time, we still have to just consider that this break of structure is actually a break of structure to then take price higher. And until this daily low here is violated, I'd be happy to forecast that the pound dollar could potentially go higher still. So looking at the daily, it's not really super clear. I mean, we already had a reaction off this order block, and it's obviously now returned back down here. But it's still valid for us to just say that we could potentially get a reaction from the daily low going back up to the high, or potentially breaking structure. But now, looking at the 4-hour, it actually gives us a clearer picture of some potential possibilities for this week on GU. So what we saw last week, as I outlined in my previous forecast, is that we've got the breaker structures to the low here, and we've got the mitigations coming through. So you basically got your institutional order flow coming through in this area. And then we had this big break of structure here, and since that break of structure, this area, it's not really been revisited. So potentially if the institutions are looking to mitigate orders in that area, then that's still a possibility for price to react from that area, because it's not actually reacted from this area yet, and it's left imbalance behind. But looking in the more shorter term, what we had is another break of structure here, which was essentially mitigated there, and then we actually have a break of structure here, leaving behind this high, and then price reversed, and it's now broken structure up to the high. So in terms of the fact that we're at the low on the daily, and then on the 4-hour time frame, price has broken structures to the high, I would be looking probably for buys this week on the 4-hour structure on pound dollar. So looking at the current structure, we've got here on the 4-hour this break of structure. Now in terms of where this break of structure comes from, there's really a high sell volume in this wick and in this candle overall, and then that directly breaks the structure and leaves behind an imbalance. So I think it makes sense for me personally for price to potentially just react pretty much out of where it is now, but anywhere within this zone, as institutions could be mitigating the orders that they use to generate liquidity before this break of structure. But also in terms of the thesis of it buying following this 4-hour break of structure, that won't be invalidated until this range extreme is broken down here. So that's our 4-hour range. So until this range extreme is broken, I'd still be looking for buys on the 4-hour based on this 4-hour break structure. So on the 4-hour, I can see these two areas, the direct cause of this break structure to buy from, and then also this more extreme point, which does as well have imbalance. So if we saw price come down to this more extreme point and then buy up to break structure again, that'd be perfect. But I'm not opposed to the possibility that price could just continue higher straight out of this area. Now, in terms of then what will happen, now if price is going to just continue upwards, then that's a possibility and we'll follow this daily intent to break structure higher. But like I mentioned earlier, there's this order block up here with clear imbalance, which was the last point of institutional mitigation. So really I'd be interested to see how price reacts off that area, and I would potentially be interested in looking for sells out of that area. So just to recap on pound dollar, I'm basically looking for a buy position out of here, a buy position out of here, and then potentially a sell position out of here. So as always, I'll just see how price reacts to these points that I've forecasted from, and if we get an entry opportunity with my strategy, then I'll be looking to take an entry if I'm in front of the chart at that time. Alright guys, so please do subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying these videos. I'm going to keep on putting the forecasting videos out, and if you're interested in my Forex trading and my Forex journey, or anything to do with my Forex trading journey, then please do subscribe to the channel and leave comments and likes on my channel because it helps me out a lot. So moving on to the Australian dollar, US dollar. So what we can see on the daily, again, it's a similar situation really. I mean, it's similar across all these dollar crosses. We can see the same situation as on EU and GU. We've got the breaker structure to the low, and then another breaker structure to the low, followed by this breaker structure to the high. Now, what's interesting here is we can actually see this wick trick here, where this wick actually is higher than this wick, which means that there's been a liquidity grab above this high. Now, when we mark on that wick, this intent move on the daily, the first break structure to the high, has actually reacted pretty much perfectly off that wick. So to me, that indicates that potentially, even though we've had our breaker structure to the high, we could just be looking at price going lower to just continue this overall downtrend that's ongoing on the daily at the minute. And the reason for this whole move was just to mitigate orders up in this area here. Now, still though, I wouldn't be completely against price buying, but honestly for me, I'm more interested in sells on the AU at the minute. So we have this break structure to the high, and last week I forecasted this point of interest here. Now, what we had is price has come and it's violated the overall point of interest, but it's not actually closed below it in terms of the body of the candles. So it's potentially still possible that price will move up away from this overall order block here. But to be fair, what I'm really expecting on this is just a continuation of this 4-hour order flow, which is ongoing at the minute. So since we reached that point, which I mentioned on the daily up here, we've basically had an order flow transition on the 4-hour, and now we're breaking structures to the low. So we get a breaker structure, and then we get another breaker structure here, which is caused by this area, which then gets mitigated there. Now we get another breaker structure there, which I've not actually marked on, which then gets mitigated up here. And then we've got another breaker structure here, which the cause of that is pretty much this candle, which gets mitigated there. And then we've got another breaker structure. So we're now looking at being in this 4-hour range here, in my opinion. So in terms of this 4-hour range, it was really just a case of looking, and I mentioned this last week, looking for sells out of this point of interest up here. So what we can see clearly is that price has reacted off this point of interest which I identified, and now really I'm just expecting it to follow through to the downside. Now a confluence for this as well is that we've basically got all these equal lows here on the, well, from the daily time frame, but you can see it more clearly on these lower time frames, but we've got equal lows there. So there's going to be a lot of liquidity, a lot of orders underneath that area, so the institutions really have a good reason to push price down through there and collect all that liquidity. So at this point, in terms of actually getting involved in this sell move, ideally it would have been ideal to get an entry off into this move last week, somewhere up here, but I didn't manage to get into it last week, unfortunately. So what I'd really be interested in now is this 1 hour point of interest. So on the 1 hour on AU, we can see price moves up into our 4 hour order block, breaks structure to the high there, and then breaks structure to the low. So this is our first signal basically that price could potentially start to move lower. So at that point, what I'm waiting for is to see some mitigation of this area up here, and we actually get that mitigation. Not only do we get mitigation, but we get a liquidity grab just above it, which really adds confluence to this whole idea that price could potentially go lower. So I'm now waiting for another break of structure on the 1 hour. So in terms of the 1 hour range being from here to here, what we get is a break of structure on Friday morning out of this area here. So for me, this is basically the confirmation of order flow transition and the confirmation of a change in trend on the 1 hour due to this mitigation and the 2 breaks structure. Now we've created this new 1 hour range from here to here. So considering that we're expecting it to already go lower to take out this liquidity coming out of the 4 hour order block, I'm mainly interested in it coming back up to this 1 hour area which caused the last 1 hour break of structure, and then continuing from that 1 hour area down to take out this liquidity at the low. So the only thing I'm forecasting right now on AU this week is a sell from this 1 hour point of interest, and hopefully we can take out that liquidity there. Now I still wouldn't be opposed if we saw price come right up to take out these highs and then we see this situation again. I'd also happily get involved in it just based on the fact that this 4 hour high still holds. But what I'm really hoping for is that this 1 hour order flow will continue and we'll get an opportunity to get involved at that point of interest there, which is the 1 hour order block which caused the most recent break structure. Alright, so I'm moving on to Nzdusd. So Nzdusd, the structure is a bit different than the other pairs were. So we had a break structure here. Yeah, break structure there, break structure there, and then we've got another break structure here, then break structure to the high there, then break structure to the low coming from there. So it's a bit less clear exactly what's going on Nzdusd. Obviously the USD cross pairs are quite highly correlated, but for me I'm just forecasting based on what I'm actually seeing on the chart right now. So the direction of the market on NU is not entirely clear on the daily. Like there's no real consecutive breaks of structure in the same direction. But going off the most recent break of structure on NU, we've got this break of structure to the high. So in terms of that break structure to the high, what we can see is this clear sell volume down here, which is clearly where institutions have sold to potentially generate liquidity so they could make this overall buy move happen. So potentially price could dip into this zone and then the institutions could mitigate their sell positions that they took, and then they could push price higher to break structure on the daily, or at least just to push higher and achieve some other objectives on the lower time frame. So what we've also got on NU is on this lower time frame, we've had a break of structure to the high here, leaving behind this clear order block and point of interest with imbalance. So it's definitely possible that price will just continue following this 4-hour order block before either continuing to break structure to the high or reversing and coming lower. So there's really only two opportunities that I'm seeing on NU right now based on the current structure, and that is the overall buy on the daily. So that's continuing this move here, the break structure move, coming out of this order block here. So basically just a buy from this area. And then the second opportunity I'm seeing, which is just based on this shorter term 4-hour structure, is a buy coming out of this area down here, which we're pretty much already tapping into. So it'll be interesting to see if either of these two opportunities play out next week. And if these opportunities do play out, then I'll be looking to get involved in these buys. Now, of course, just because I'm predicting buys, it doesn't mean that it can't sell. And if the structure changes and we start to see some sell structures develop, then potentially I'd be interested in looking for sells. But right now, the only structures that I'm seeing that are presented are basically for buying opportunities. So I'll be watching these 2 points of interest to potentially look for buys on Nzdusd. So that's it for my main pairs that I normally trade. So I just also want to forecast the USD Swiss because there's a pretty interesting situation which I've seen on USD Swiss. So on USD Swiss we have this big impulsive move up, and then we did actually break structure to the low twice, but the overall momentum of this break structure to the low was quite a bit lower than this impulsive move to the high was. So in that sense, you could definitely say that the market has the potential to go higher. Now, just in terms of my rules and looking at the breaker structure, on the most recent daily range before this one, we basically have this high and then this low. Now this high has now been broken and closed above by this candle here. So we've got a new daily range now. And this daily range was broken, this daily range was created by a break to the high. So it's a bullish range basically. So within this daily range, I'm really expecting price now to continue higher. And I think it makes a lot of sense for price to continue higher out of this daily candle here, because that's the candle where the institutions manipulated the liquidity so that they could create this break of structure move. What we've also got as a confluence to this is that price has travelled 165 pips in basically 3 days there in them 3 candles, but in the last 5 days it's only come down 115 pips. So the momentum is clearly on the upside in this pair. And not only that, this order block is super clear. There's clear imbalance there. So I'm really interested in seeing the reaction of this order block. Now, looking at the 4-hour on this pair, what I can also see is that we've actually had a 4-hour break of structure to the high here, which essentially comes from this wick. Now, it is possible that price could just react off this overall imbalance here rather than actually tapping into the daily order block. So considering that as a possibility, since we've seen this break of structure to the high on the 4-hour, I do actually think that this is a valid point of interest on the 4-hour for us to potentially look at buying from. Now overall, I do think this daily point of interest down here is a lot more favourable and has a high confidence for price to react from it. But if we do start to see price reacting to this 4-hour point of interest and failing to break below it, then I'd definitely be interested in buying out of this area. So on USD CHF, I'm looking for buys out of this area down here, which caused the most recent 4-hour break of structure to the high. And then I'm also looking for buys out of this daily zone here, which is the point which caused the most recent daily break structure. So if these two opportunities get presented, then I'll definitely be interested in buying from either of these zones. And I'm not interested in any sell opportunities right now on USDCHF. Alright guys, so I hope you've enjoyed that video and got some value and you can compare it to your own analysis. And thank you for watching guys. If you did enjoy the video and you want to see more forecasts on a weekly basis, then please subscribe to my channel. And if you've got any questions about my forecasting or about any of the forecasts I've made, then just leave a comment below and I'll get back to you guys. Also, in my description, I'll link a few resources relating to Forex, and I'll also link a written version of this forecast. Alright, so thanks a lot for watching guys, and I hope you have a good weekend and a good trading week next week.